During the early hours of Sunday morning, it was clear to both Syria and Israel that the IDF defense in the south of the Golan has crumbled. Remnants of 53rd Battalion, some 15 tanks, have gathered in Mount Fares, secluded from the rest of the Israeli force. 3 tanks from 679 held the road to the south, leading to the Sea of Galilee. A company from 82nd Battalion in Mount Yisufun making necessary repairs and filling the tank belly with ammunition. 82nd Battalion B Company at 111 posts. And Tzvika Force, basically one tank who requested and granted permission to slowly retreat northward. As for the hours to come, he would be the only tank holding the road to Nafah base. On the Syrian side, 51 and 46 Brigade are deep inside Hushnia region. 132 is waiting in the south, and the Syrian High Command need to decide what to do next. Things have gone well, but not as well as the Syrian expected and hoped. The IDF in the center and in the north is holding on with no significant ground to win. In the south, a pocket of resistance with unknown forces were still firing and detaining the 5th and 9th Infantry Divisions. 43rd Tank Brigade from 9th Infantry Division is going over the anti-tank ditches. The reports from 51 and 46 made it clear there is hardly any enemy forces at the sector, and instead of attacking straight ahead to Nafah and to the center of the Golan, 43rd was sent to attack the 7th Brigade in the north. Unfortunately for them, their movement was monitored by the Israelis at 111 posts. 111 observer called Bengal, who immediately identified the threat to his flank. He ordered 82nd C Company called Tiger over the radio to encounter the threat. Zamir, C Company commander, quickly stationed his forces in an ambush formation along the road the Syrians were expected to come from. Without night vision, he ordered to turn off the engines and to listen carefully to the roar of the 43rd Tank Brigade coming closer and closer. At 3:30, Zamir ordered to open fire from just 1,200 meters. Within 2 hours, 30 to 40 Syrian tanks and armored vehicles were hit. 43rd Brigadier announced on the radio he is facing a larger force ahead of him and asked to retreat. He was granted permission and the 43rd Brigade ceased to exist. Its remnants were annexed to 51st Tank Brigade inside Hushnia in the morning. 14 tanks from 266 Battalion arrived to the front. 6 were sent to the east helping out 82nd Battalion, and 8 were sent to Tzvika at the oil road. 188 Deputy collected 6 repair tanks from the tank shop at Nafah and joined Tzvika. For a while, the IDF HQ assumed the situation is bad, but under control. Later that morning, 188 Brigadier said to his radio officer, "It's time to accept we do not have a brigade anymore. Get me my tank and I will join what's left of it in the front." 188 Brigadier joined the forces at the oil road, and the former lone tank called Tzvika Force is now 16 tanks strong. This is probably the reason why the first significant force to arrive to the scene was sent to the wrong place. At 7 o'clock in the morning, 679 Brigadier arrived with 23 tanks to the Nafah base. After a short meeting with Eitan, the Golan commander, he was ordered to the south of Konetra. It is hard to understand why really. Eitan should have known the entire enemy division is at his doorstep, and only 16 tanks is stopping it to his south. On the Syrian side, early in the morning, the 47th Tank Brigade joined 51 and 46. By this time, the Syrian had some 300 tanks and a few hundred armored vehicles deep inside the south sector. While Israel assumed the worst is behind it, Syria Armored Division 1 geared into action. At 8 o'clock with the morning sun on their back, 91st Tank Brigade advanced toward Nafah. This time the Syrians planned a pincer attack, east and west of the Nafah pocket. At 10 o'clock, first fire exchange took place between 91 and 58 brigades, and a small force from the 82nd Battalion. As ammunition ran out, 10 tanks from 82nd and 179 tried frantically to call someone at 188 to instruct them what to do. Since they couldn't get any response from 188 and the situation became desperate, they called their own brigadier, Bengal, and asked for instructions. In one of the most controversial decisions of the battle, Bengal instructed them to retreat to 7th Brigade HQ to replenish their tanks. This tank force never came back to confront Armored Division 1 or any part of it. No one at the Golan Operation Room knew about it, and the eastern side of the front has been left totally exposed. After the war, Bengal has been asked repeatedly about this decision. His reply was, "I knew them very well, and there was never a question of not believing them. But to hear of an entire division so close to us, and the 82nd facing total annihilation, I couldn't see what else I should have done." Just before 12 o'clock midday, someone at the North Operation Room realizes from different radio channels that there's at least 2 enemy brigades attacking Nafah base. Urgently, they are calling 679 Brigadier, the only large force in the area, to head back to Nafah and hold back 91st Brigade. 679 Brigadier Uri Oro left a small force behind him to protect the gap south of the Booster Ridge, and with 15 tanks headed back west. All this time, completely unaware of the enemy movement toward his base, a tiny-struck 93rd Battalion who just arrived to help 188 at Rushnia. 188 Brigadier wasn't even close. By this time, Rushnia was a Syrian territory, 45 or more than a divisional force. 93rd Battalion Commander Gottfried, with his 13 tanks, slowly and securely did as he instructed east of the base. When he first noticed T-62 sliding from the ridge in front of him, his mind refuses to accept those are really Syrian tanks. He is calling them on different radio channels until fire breaks out. 93rd Battalion managed to hold back 91st Brigade for some time, but at a costly price. Almost the entire 93rd Battalion is hit. Unknown to the Israeli forces in the area, 51st Brigade took a path in a hidden creek west of the oil road. 3 tanks from different outfits form an ad hoc force and fire at 51st on the edges of the base. They were all hit but managed to report of a Syrian force very close to Nafah. For some odd reason, no one at the sector command in Nafah base understood the threat and no one called to make them realize. At 1 p.m., a staff officer decided to stretch his legs out of the command bunker. It took him a few seconds to believe his eyes, but on the road circling the base, few T-62s are clearly visible. A better look, and behind them, dozens of T-62s sliding from the ridge. The staff officer ran back to the bunker trying to keep his calm, informed Etan the Syrian is at the gate. A few seconds of disbelief and an order was issued to evacuate the base. At 1:30, Syrian tanks circling the base. In retrospect, we can assume they were interested most of all in cutting the logistic support of the rest of the Israeli forces, rather than fighting inside the structures. The sector commander Etan ordered Ben Joam to quickly turn back northward. The 15 tanks at the oil road were almost surrounded after 24 hours of continuous fire, exhausted and short of ammunition. Still, small Israeli forces arrived to the base. A lieutenant named Anderson fired at 51st Brigade at the south edges of the base. Ben Joam left his deputy to guard his rear and rushed back with Zvika and some lost tanks from different outfits. This was anything but an organized charge. The rush back to save the base was without observing for enemy tanks or infantry well hidden between the rocks. From a distance, Ben Joam can see dozens of T-62 at the edges of the base. He calls for his deputy to join him. His deputy closes the gap and sees targets all around it. What they can't see is Syrian infantry well hidden between the rocks. At 2:15 Israeli, 188 deputy is shot dead by a machine gun. At 2:30, 188 brigadier died with his operation officer in his tank, once again by Syrian infantry machine gun. 188 brigade no longer exists. No one is answering the radio, and Zvika is trying to gather around lost tanks to attack the Syrian encirclement. Everything is now dependent on less than 20 tanks from 679 brigade. At 12 o'clock, Orr left a small force to guard his rear and divided his 20 tanks to two forces. One, commanded by Sheffer, assigned to advance slowly along the road leading westward to Nafah. Orr and his main force, 15 tanks, went into deep southward maneuver to supply 91st Brigade from their flank. At 4 o'clock, Ribbenbach, who commanded 4 tanks protecting the oil road, was killed. What left of his force retreated, and now the main road leading to Nafah is open. The reports from the Egyptian front were horrible as well. Sense of gloom and doom ran across the command of the Israeli side. Dayan, charismatic and articulate in peacetime, pale and clearly shocked under fire, was reported to mumble about the imminent destruction of the State of Israel. In his worst nightmares, he saw the IDF disintegrating and the Syrians sliding from the Golan to the rest of Israel. This was, of course, a gross exaggeration. Most of the Israeli army was still in process of recruiting and organizing, and the Syrians, on the other hand, never thought of sliding down from the Golan, and thus even maps of northern Israel were not issued to their officers. At 4 o'clock, the last 3 tanks of 679 arrived to the front, commanded by Deputy Battalion Commander named Danon. On their way, they are stopped by a staff officer running away from Nafah base, who described to them where the enemy is and how bad things are. Danon decides to get off the paved road and supplies 51st Brigade from their side. He collects some more long tanks from other forces, and together they are firing at 51 Brigade. The Syrians were attacked by all forces from the east, few tanks from the north commanded by Lieutenant Anderson, and now by the Danon force from the west. This time the Syrian command has had enough and called off the attack. Due to zero sources from the Syrian side, we can only assume what was on their mind. They were under fire from 3 sides and could not possibly have known that those are a fraction of forces from different outfits and very low on ammunition. With most of the army intact, they might have fought a second attack a day after, might be more successful. This was the peak of the Syrian army success at the war. Later attempts were made to attack Nafah, but they were made by a more organized force, who managed during Sunday night to fix damaged tanks and have much-needed rest. According to Soviet sources, Hafez al-Assad, the always prudent Syrian president, asked at Sunday night for a ceasefire. Surprised somehow, the Soviet inquired with Egypt, who replied with a vehemently negative reaction. A week later, the IDF forces encountered 3 divisions from the Jordan and Iraqi expedition forces, threatened Damascus, and caused a dangerous rift between the USA and the Soviet Union.